Good morning and welcome to the 118th of our Bible studies. We're drawing towards the end of the period of the divided kingdom from Elijah to the fall of Jerusalem, and today we actually come to the fall and destruction of Jerusalem. We are reading from the second book of Kings, chapter 25, verses 1 to 17. The last few kings of Judah before the exile were at the mercy of rival superpowers, Egypt and Babylon. Babylon gained the upper hand in Judah and took the king and many skilled workers into exile, along with much plunder. They installed a puppet king, Zedekiah, and he reigned 9 years before this happened. Zedekiah rebelled against King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon, who then came to Jerusalem with all his army. They attacked on the 10th day of the 9th month of Zedekiah's reign, setting up camp outside the city, building up siege towers and keeping the city under military blockade until Zedekiah's 11th year. On the 9th day of the 4th month, when the famine was so bad there was no food left, they broke through the city walls. Surrounded, the king and the troops inside made their escape by night. They left through the palace gardens by the gateway between the walls and fled in the direction of the Jordan Valley. The Babylonian army set off in pursuit of the escaping king, capturing him in the plains near Jericho. His guards deserted him. Zedekiah was brought to King Nebuchadnezzar at Riblah city. There Nebuchadnezzar passed sentence. In front of Zedekiah his sons were murdered. Then Nebuchadnezzar had Zedekiah blinded, put in chains, and taken to Babylon. A long period of decline followed the death of Josiah in 609 BC. The pressure from powerful neighbours was becoming more and more oppressive during the short reigns of the next 4 kings, and this in 587 BC was the inevitable result. Only the poorest peasants were left to farm the land. Everyone else, the skilled workers, the middle classes and the intellectuals, were all shipped off en masse to Babylon. The ruling class was largely imprisoned or put to death. Judah's homeland was in ruins, now reduced to a harmless and defeated agrarian economy. If the worship and traditions of the Jews were going to survive, it would have to be amongst the educated exiles in Babylon, and to a much lesser extent among the refugees who had fled to Egypt, including the unwilling Jeremiah. There in Egypt, surrounded by Egyptian polytheists, at Elephantine Island near Aswan, they built a replica temple and carried on for the time being as best they could. We shall visit the thoughts of the prophets of this period later, in a series of short studies about their writings, which will include some astonishing developments in their understanding of God, which emerged at this time. But for now, we will try to follow the people and what happened to them. We shall see what it was like to be an exile in Babylon, and how it happened that they were allowed to go back home to re-establish their capital and their temple. Writers from this time clearly saw the hand of God in all of this, maybe in a sharper way than we might today in similar circumstances. Before the fall of Jerusalem, local Jewish communities were already having to organize their own worship whenever their parish Kohen went up to Jerusalem to serve his turn as a priest at the temple. Following this precedent, the exiled Jews were to organize themselves for mutual support and encouragement during their times of extreme hardship. This gave rise to the first informal synagogues, The word synagogue means meeting or assembly, and it means that rather than the building in which they met. These meetings will have continued to take place during and after the exile, alongside the worship in any rebuilt Jerusalem temple. Synagogues went on to become centres of Jewish community life across the Jewish diaspora. Synagogues, as formal worship centres and schools, appear to date at least as far back as the 3rd century BC, from which time the earliest archaeological remains have been dated. 1st century AD synagogue worship was the model for the early Christian synaxis, the ministry of the word, which forms the first half of our present-day Eucharist. So we come to the end of our study of the kingdoms of Israel and Judah, and now we turn to the exiles in Babylon and their eventual return to Jerusalem. We begin that exploration tomorrow, and I'll see you then.